Hey, this is John Siskovich, and I want to walk you through my 2015 pasture-raised egg budget. So we're sitting in the middle of my pastured egg budget right now as part of my whole farm budget for 2015. And I want to go over my process a little bit so you can see how I got my numbers, why I got my numbers, and then how you might be able to take that knowledge and apply it to your own farm. Again, with any information that I post, it's not the only way to do it. It's just the way I do it. And if you would like to copy it or make use of the work that I've went through, you're more than welcome to. So we'll start with, the numbers that everybody asks: expected gross profits, gross 24, net 6,300, and that is before labor. And I've even updated the broiler budget sheet since creating that video. Now I'm taking labor out and not factoring it into cost of goods sold and having it its own separate category. One, because we have full-time staff on the farm and we do HR a little differently than rolling it in the cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold is just like feed and egg cartons and things that you need to sell the eggs. Labor is a slightly different thing. And if you're, depending on what your situation is, whether you're paying yourself or not paying yourself or have interns or whatever, labor can become tricky. So pulling it out and putting it in its own separate category. So we'll start off with this column right here, because that's where I generated the bulk of my numbers, and we'll just go from top to bottom. So on top, we have production efficiency. There's different age birds here on farm. I always keep like 2 rotating batches of older birds and younger birds, and we cull every 2 years and replace those birds with new birds, because as time goes on and they go through their molts, they drop in production efficiency. Now, I was really conservative with my numbers, and even so far this year, this 20% is actually a little low. They're producing more than 20%. So I was really pessimistic on my numbers with the hopes that if I was prepared for the worst and the best case scenario happened, then I would be good. Next year, I'll have better numbers from this year, and I'll just use those numbers for my estimates, my budget for the year. But for this, I was just very conservative. And you can see in all these cells, I just put in whatever percentage I thought was appropriate based on my experience, based on the egg tracking from this past year, and based on any research that I've done. Over here on the left, you can see I have number of birds, and then I have percent efficiency for production, and that's how many eggs they're producing. And that'll come in more important in the later tables. So the next one is percent egg production, and I created a equation based on the number of birds that I have, 88 birds for the oldest, the number of birds, let me just do it over here so it's cleaner, times the production efficiency, or number of birds times the number of days times production efficiency. So if this many birds was laying an egg every single day, times 40%, because that's how efficient they are production-wise, that would give me that number. So these are eggs produced every single day, and then I have it broken down into total dozens. So it's just, this is a sum of all these divided by 12, and then a total dozens at the end. That gives me how many eggs I'm going to produce this year based on how productive my birds have been. Then on the bottom, I have feed. And now we do feed restriction, and I use that feed restriction number of 0.27 pounds per bird as an average throughout the entire year. It might fluctuate with getting in brewer's grains. We might have differences because they're on pasture and they're foraging and they might not eat so much. But regardless, I used 0.27 pounds per bird for my feed equations. We'll just pick a random cell, and you can see I have the number of birds times 0.27 pounds feed times 31 days for March. And that gives me a number for March. And then it'll give me a total feed, 31,419.225 pounds for the entire year. So those were the big tables to work out for me. These production numbers will change over time. I'll add and change the efficiencies on how efficient the birds are. There'll be variables on how we raise them in the winter versus how we raise them in the summer. I'll get better on that over time, but this is as good as it's going to get for the first iteration. Let's go over to cost of goods sold. We use shavings in the coop. I created a number, 174. That was how many bales of shavings we typically use on the farm at any given year to change out the shavings in the bottom of the coop once or twice, once every 2 weeks, full change, and then once a week we add more shavings on. So shavings is a cost on farm, factor that in. Feed, I got this feed number. If it's 51 cents a pound, which is what I'm currently paying, actually what I'm paying now is a little bit lower, so I can adjust that, times this many pounds, which is what I got from this table here, equals this number, $15,910. So you can see for cost of goods sold, feed is my major obstacle to overcome. If I can get a cheaper supply of feed, it makes my egg numbers a lot better. Egg cartons, we do buy in egg cartons. We also recycle old egg cartons from people who've brought them in for us to use. That's a cost that I wanted to factor in. Washing, we use some materials for our washing system on farm, and then scratch green. We don't use that much of it, but it is an expense, nearly $650 for the entire year. So the total year cost of goods sold, $18,319. Because my chicken system is already established, I don't anticipate any capital expenditures for this. It's now just kind of run of the show. I did a rough estimate of labor. You can see my note here, 3 hours a day chores plus 6 hours a week miscellaneous if something breaks, or if you don't use the 6 hours one week, maybe you invest 12 hours the next week when you're fixing a coop or pulling it out of something or setting up the winter chicken area. So I created an average labor cost. If I was to pay somebody $12 an hour to come into the farm and do specifically this, it would cost me $16,884 for the year. That number could be completely abstract depending on what your situation is. So I created these tables. I got my cost of goods sold. I broke down my gross sales into percentages of retail and wholesale. So 80% retail, and we do have some wholesale accounts, about 20%. Their prices. And so once we got the total number of dozens produced, I went and did that times $6 a dozen, times 80%. Let's see if I can highlight this. Yeah, total dozens produced times 80% times $6. And that gave me, one number, and the wholesale, and you add those two together. You can see the equation up here. Add those two together, and that gives me my gross sales. I take my cost of goods sold, which is $18,000, minus that or subtract that from my gross sales, and that gives me my estimated net for the entire year. Now, because I had all this broken down my month anyways, it was very easily to come over here and create a cash flow statement for farm. So I broke it down not only by monthly, but then put that into quarterly. Eggs are at a loss in the winter, which is terrible, and then they make some money over the year. Again, I went really pessimistic on these numbers. You'll see if you go to the website, farmmarketingsolutions.com, and download this sheet. You'll see I was very pessimistic on the numbers. The numbers from 2014, the record keeping was a little busy and cluttered and scattered and not as clean and organized as it could have been. That's one of the things we're adjusting in 2015, is getting on top of our record keeping, which is why we started the Farm Finance Challenge. You can head over to Farm Finance Challenge to check that out, or farmfinancechallenge.com to check that out. That's it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, or hit me up on email, hello@farmmarketingsolutions.com. And until next time, I will see you out in the fields.